The platform to protect whistleblowers in Africa is hosting the Whistleblowers Protection Week from the 5th to the 9th of December. The week helps shine a spotlight on the men and women across the continent who often risk their lives to help uncover corruption. For more on this, we join in studio by Southern African Director at PPLAAF Pusetso Morapedi. Pusetso, very good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Now talk to us about the rights of whistleblowers. I often marvel at, do they actually have any rights?
They do in most legal frameworks, right? But how the legal frameworks are enforced, one could argue and say maybe they don't really have rights. But the right to express themselves, the right to report, the right to be protected is usually enshrined in different legal frameworks across the continent.
So let's talk about this week and the various conversations that are going on around whistleblowers. What is at the core of these conversations?
So at the core of the conversations there, what does real holistic protection look like? Because if it existed, then we would not have the Babita situation or Eric Peña situation or Moss Parkway situation. We will not have whistleblowers in the DRC seeking refuge in France situation, or Malawian whistleblowers who worked in different countries also in hiding. So it's looking at what does protection look like and what can states do to really protect whistleblowers.
Well, what does the state currently do to protect whistleblowers?
The different conversations that we've been having this year in different countries, not just South Africa, is that the government or statutory bodies are also trying to figure it out. And I guess it's the right time to have the conversation because we're seeing people dying. We're seeing people being dismissed and losing their jobs. So it begins with asking the whistleblowers themselves what support that they needed or they wish they could have had, from psychosocial support to financial support to legal assistance to media assistance. So it really comes it's multidimensional, multifaceted, and really, really multi-layered. So it is a conversation that we're having, and different states are also trying to figure it out with us, actually. Yeah.
Well, I would suppose that Babita Deokaran's family, for instance, are saying too little, too late. I mean,
definitely.
The necessity or the desire to have these conversations now, after government has continued to encourage whistleblowers to come to the fore and only want to figure out post the act what needs to be done to protect them, I think is a bit of a shame.
It is. It really is, and it's actually, and it's cross-cutting across the continent. Actually, that the political will to ensure real protection, where those who report wrongdoing actually end up running away or being killed, whilst those who are corrupt actually are protected by the system. So now we're trying to figure out how do we ensure the political will that could make sure that there is a shift where those who report wrongdoing are protected from the beginning, encapsulated from the beginning, and those who are actually, the wrongdoers from the beginning are suspects and they have to prove that indeed they did not do what they are accused of. But you are right that most have suffered and people have lost jobs, people have lost families because some of these have led to divorces, families breaking, children losing their schools because parents can no longer afford school fees. So it has been really a dire situation for most whistleblowers.
Well, let's talk about a global standard. Is there a global standard to how whistleblowers are treated?
I mean, the UN Convention Against Corruption does have articles or provisions on the protection of whistleblowers, or protection of those who report wrongdoing. The AU Convention as well, SADC, Protocol Against Corruption, has a provision in there. But the most important legal instruments are different national legislative acts that should ensure the protection. The PDA tries to do so. Witness Protection Act here tries to do so. The Labor Relations Act tries to do so. But they're rarely read together when helping whistleblowers. So you find that whistleblowers are retaliated against because the Labor Relations Act doesn't have a provision that actually really targets the protection of whistleblowers.
Well, let's talk about specific cases. There is a particular whistleblower from the DRC who's blown the whistle on a huge corruption scandal involving the former president, Joseph Kabila, I understand.
Yeah. I mean, so Jean-Jacques Lumumba and actually a couple of other, whistleblowers from the DRC discovered some suspicious movements of money in a particular bank that they were working at, and they were, overseeing a particular account. And when they raised the concerns with the suspicious movements of money transactions, they were actually threatened by the deputy general manager there, saying that, you guys might be shot, leaving the office if you continue, poking your noses in this issue. And it turned out that actually the bank, that the movement of the money from this bank to or from the treasury to this bank, the bank actually's shareholders, one of them was Kabila's sister, who owed like 40% shareholding. And in the other case with Coco and Malela, they also discovered the movement of money, particularly cash deposits, in millions. And when they raised concerns with these, they were also threatened, and they had to seek refuge in France. And PLAAF, supported them and helped them in moving out of the DRC. So, yeah.
So what is that process like, and why did PLAAF assist these individuals and not Babita Deokaran, for instance?
Because they actually knew about PLAAF, or they got to know about PLAAF. Information is very important. Not many people in South Africa even know about Whistleblower House, for example. But as we heighten our public education and raising awareness, more people will know about PLAAF and Whistleblower House. They will know about Corruption Watch and exactly what to do to blow the whistle safely, strategically, and thoughtfully. And sometimes, I always say corruption, when you fight it, it fights back. Sometimes you can do all you can and they still get to you, because the resources that civil society organizations have aren't as enormous as, say, the state. But still, even with the state and witness protection programs, sometimes the corrupt and criminals can still get to those who actually need protection. So I think it's just about knowledge.
So we talk about these individuals from the DRC.
Yeah.
We know that they're in France and there's some protection. Yeah. Isn't that too much information to be in the public domain?
I mean, they do know that they're in France now. I mean, a few months ago, Lumumba's car was burnt. So it means someone actually has managed to track him down and found his car and burned it down and burned it up. So, I mean, as civil society organization, we can only do so much. And that's why we need governments to also come on board. But until there's a culture or even an understanding that whistleblowers actually are doing public good, or at least offering some public good, until that happens, we are going to have the lack of support and the lack of political will from the state and sometimes even from the citizens, ensuring that whistleblowers are protected.
So who in the state is actually responsible? Is it the NPA? Because as a prosecuting authority, they obviously are super keen to establish what information is available out there to prosecute those that are laundering government funds or the funds that belong to us or the citizens of any country.
But what is interesting is that the prosecution authority agency in whatever country will probably only come in when it is time for the whistleblower to go testify, if they've agreed to testify or to be witness. So then they become a witness, and then they can be protected within the witness, protection program. But before then they cannot, they are not, well, as it is, they are not protected within the Witness Protection Act. But these are the conversations that we are having now, that maybe when it comes to whistleblowing, that needs to change, that from the beginning, the NPA needs to come in, the HRC needs to come in, PPSA needs to come in and figure out how to protect the whistleblower. And
so let me get you right,
yeah.
before we wrap up. So I'm a potential whistleblower, right? And I discover that there's somebody in this in an organization that I work for is laundering money.
Yeah.
Right? Who do I go to? Do I go to the police? If I go to the police, what is that process? How do we get to the position of, okay, acknowledgement that I am a whistleblower and yes, I will need protection?
First, well, now what we're trying to do is actually ensure that people blow the whistle thoughtfully, strategically, and safely. I will ask you as a, say, maybe your legal advisor from civil society, do you have evidence? Do you have documents? Because there's no point blowing the whistle when the NPA may not even have the evidence that you have against the corrupt. So I'll ask you that, and I'll ask if you have someone who can give you legal advice. And then take it from there. Because then, from that, the legal advisor or the legal counsel will direct you to the institution, whether it's the Auditor General or the the Public Protector, HRC, or even the Gender Equality Commission. So it's different institutions for different issues. So we will advise you where to go should you go to civil society or even the Public Protector first.
And finally, let's look at the continent
in
terms of its capacity to protect whistleblowers. How does it rate comparative to the rest of the world?
Ooh. I would say, and this is just my own ranking, I'd say 45%. And the 45% it's from the fact that some countries have legal framework and some institutional framework when it comes to, say, anti-corruption agencies. But otherwise, the protection of whistleblowers, it's not looking good. And as civil society organizations, we are starting to have conversations to see if maybe the AU could start having, say, a whistleblowing directive. And then that can maybe then cascade down to regional blocks like your ECOWAS and SADC and the EAC. But for now, we don't really have that heightened protective instrument or architecture for whistleblowers. It is dangerous. I know our legal counsel says people don't understand how life-ending whistleblowing is in Africa. I
was just thinking to myself that being a whistleblower is practically a death wish.
Pusetso,
I appreciate your time. Pusetso Morapedi, Southern African Director at a platform to protect whistleblowers in Africa, giving us that conversation.